Live. It's live, Roy.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. This is Roy Priest, Chair of the Housing Opportunities Commission. I want to welcome all of you all to our special session on April the 21st, 2023. There are 5 members of our commission available. First of all, introduce Fran Kelleher virtually, our Vice Chair, Jeffrey Mekowitz, our Chair Pro Tem, Commissioner Rick Nelson, and Commissioner Jackie Simon. This constitutes the quorum required for this special meeting, and I want to then proceed with the one item that was scheduled for the special session. And so what I'll do now is I will turn this over to our Executive Director, Chelsea Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, HOC staff, and the public. My name is Chelsea Andrews. I'm the Executive Director of HOC. Today, we're pleased to present to the board recommendations on moving forward with our HOC new headquarters. There are a number of requests before you today that will allow us to move expeditiously as we begin this endeavor. I will turn it over to our real estate team led by Zachary Marks, our Chief Real Estate Officer, to provide context and to provide additional information.
Good. Before you proceed with that, Chelsea, is Asha there? Because I meant to ask this question before this session, but the last time this matter was presented to us, we took an action to table this action. And so I want to know formally, do we have to remove this from the table before we proceed, or how do we want to proceed with this conversation?
I think you can treat this as a new item because there's also new things that are being presented. So I would just say go ahead and start as it's a new item. I mean, you can recognize that a portion was tabled at an earlier meeting where you're reconsidering the request. Okay,
that's fine. Okay, go ahead.
Good morning, good afternoon.
Still morning.
Good morning. All right. For the record, Zachary Marks, Chief Real Estate Officer. I'm going to briefly introduce the context for what we're talking about here, and then I'm going to let the folks that have done all the hard work talk about it. So just to put some context around these requests, obviously this is a part of wanting to move forward and getting started with the new building, but I also want to provide the context around there is a contract for purchase for that small piece of county land that is to be brought into this. And some of the conditions of that purchase are that we have a general contractor under contract and that we have the third-party tester under contract. So just wanted to provide that piece of context so that as we move toward a September closing on that piece of land, that we have met all the conditions of closing, of which there are many. And the other thing, just to sort of make sure that the early start is put into the right context, because the commission has approved other early starts before, but there are many different kinds of early starts. In this case, this is mostly about securing some materials that we're worried about supply chain issues on, and getting folks started on construction drawings, shop drawings, so that when we get to construction, financing construction start, we have all the right designs in place for our contractor to use to make sure that things are accurately produced and constructed. And these are all things that were already in the total, that are already assumed in the total development budgets. All the commission is doing is bringing them forward in time when the construction financing closes in September, October, hopefully. Those costs, this funding will be reimbursed in the same way that the other development costs that you passed for this deal would be reimbursed. So I just wanted to make sure that those things were understood. Thank you. Jay?
Good morning, commissioners. My name is Jay Shepard. For the record, housing acquisition manager in our real estate development department. And I'm just going to walk you through the packet. And of course, if you guys have questions, please let me know. And we can stop and address those. So just high level, first of all, yes.
We should just advise Commissioner Priest and Kelleher that the item was not considered by the DEFIN committee. It was decided to have a single presentation to the commission as opposed to discussion at the Defend Committee.
We ran out of time.
Yeah, both myself and Commissioner Keller were present at the earlier conversations. We were aware of this action.
You mean
We watched it, we weren't
You watched
present.
it on YouTube?
Yes.
Correct.
You too.
Just to be clear.
Yes.
We were participating on YouTube as anyone
As
else
public.
participating as the public.
Right, that was the point, okay.
Good.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. So, as we've, Executive and Director Andrews has mentioned that this is the headquarters building. It's the construction to be proposed of a 9-story office building that will be the new home for HOC on downtown Silver Spring. It is steps from HOC's Elizabeth Square development, literally right across the street, and also near the Silver Spring Metro. It'll serve as the consolidated operational site for HOC's Silver Spring Service Center as well. So the next page, just quickly go through this. We have 3 asks in front of you today. The first is the item that was mentioned in the last presentation packet, which was the approval and materials to select Paradigm contractors as its general contractor and the right for our executive director to negotiate a general guaranteed maximum price contract. That contract we would later return to the commission with our detailed finance plan, later time to ratify that. The second ask is for an execution and early start agreement with Paradigm. That is, as Zach had mentioned, it will be paid out of the savings in the pre-development budget that we've identified, and we will go through that later in this packet, where those savings comes from. It essentially does accomplish 2 goals. Number one, it expedites the process of selecting and approving materials and equipment that have long lead times. And secondly, it abridges this period, which is estimated between 4 and 5 months between the notice to proceed on the early start contract and the closing, where some of these early non-expenditure costs are time consuming. This is critical on a site like this, turns out, because the site itself has very little underground activity. There's no underground parking, no underground substructure that typically in a normal office or building development requires a lot of time. And so it will be a faster process when we will need this equipment in the building, because you have vertical construction happening almost as soon after mobilization. And so that time frame is constrained. And as we've seen in the supply markets for some of the equipment, there's very long lead times, especially in electrical and mechanical equipment. And so this will allow us to use that bridge, that 4 to 5 months of time effectively, essentially. The third ask is the approval to select ECS as our third-party testing firm, and it authorizes the contract and the total budget for them. The third-party testing firm is required to be on board in advance in order for your permits to be issued, and their costs all get paid post-closing. That's a development-related expense. Dejana Donahue is here with me, and we'll cover that when we get to that section. So the next slide talks about the early start costs. This is a breakdown. These are the items and divisions, trades that the general contractor has identified for us that they expect to have longer lead items or that need to be ordered or not ordered, but the selection and the submittal process get started shortly or soon after. So like I said, we could bridge this time before closing and have these materials selected and ready to go. They're not paid for, they're just selected. And it's the process of going through each subcontractor's time to create the submittals that are reviewed by our architect and our development team. And so that is a breakdown of the early start costs. The next slide shows us where the funding comes from for this. So we had two items that we had kept in the pre-development budget that we thought we were going to incur as expenses. And turns out those we were able to work our way out of, or was determined not to be required. One was a $250,000 cost that had been proposed for a HOC signal, which is a pedestrian signal that is on demand, that it was determined to be offsite. It was over on I believe on Georgia Avenue. Anyway, the Department of Transportation and State Highway Administration determined it was not needed. And
Right.
so their recommendation back to us, we meant that we could pull it out of our budget. We had just planned for it just in case. The second item was for the growth and infrastructure policy, or GIP fees. And no pun there intended, literally it's GIP. They're essential for services in the county. It turns out that for this particular area, that's in an opportunity zone, and our legal counsel, who was helping us with land use counsel in this regard, was able to identify that this site specifically, not only is it's not necessarily exempt, it's just it does not apply to any property that fits into this opportunity zone in this particular geographic area. So we were spared the 587,000, which was a big number that we were carrying in the budget. In sum, that's $837,000. The early start cost was $766,968. So that leaves us $70,000 roughly in contingency funds, just in case, as things come up, things do come up, turns out. Okay, so the next slide. This is where Dejan is going to talk about our third-party testing solicitation that we went through. Dejan?
Yes, for the record, Dejana Donahue, project manager. The third-party testing RFP 2356 was released on December 16th, 2022, with the due date of January 20th, 2023. A pre-proposal conference was held virtually on January 4th, 2023. This RFP is quite similar to the Hillendale third-party testing selection that was brought forth before the commission for approval last cycle. So you are aware, and the scope of work outlined for the RFP includes, for instance, concrete testing, steel testing, earthwork, envelope commissioning, and windows. The scoring team consists of staff from finance, mortgage finance, and real estate divisions, as well as a ProMark representative who reviewed the responses on February 9th. The maximum points a proposal could receive is 100. Proposals were scored on the following 5 criteria: background and experience, management plan, price, methodology, and MFT participation, which includes 2 subcategories: direct MFT efforts and MFT subcontracting. Next page. HOC received 2 responsive proposals in response to the RFP. Both firms have been in business for over 30 years and have successfully performed services on previous HOC projects. Phyllis Carnes has provided third-party testing services for HOC projects such as the Leggett and the Laureate, and ECS has provided third-party testing services for HOC's Benton Silver Spring. Next slide. Here is the scoring summary. Both respondents submitted strong proposals, and it resulted in close scoring in most categories. ECS received the highest score of 89 points. Starting with background and experience, both respondents demonstrated properties similar in scope and size, including working with Montgomery County's Special Inspection Program. As a result, they received the maximum points in this category, having also worked on previous HOC projects. For the management plan, ECS's management plan included 15 personnel and 619 more hours in services. Hillis Carnes' management plan included 12 personnel. For price, Hillis Carnes received the highest score for pricing as they submitted the lowest bid. However, ECS was a close second in terms of pricing, which is also reflected in the score. For methodology, both respondents provided information regarding their methodology. However, ECS received more points due to the additional detail provided regarding their envelope commissioning and window testing approach. Next page, please. For MFT participation, Hillis Carnes did not demonstrate direct MFT efforts within their proposal. However, they did disclose an MBE firm for subcontracting at 30%. As a result, they received 10 points for MFT participation. And ECS did demonstrate direct MFT efforts. However, they are not subcontracting any portion of their services. As a result, ECS received 5 points for MFT participation. With that said, in regarding to the scoring summary, staff recommends ECS for third-party testing services for $299,930, and that the commission include a 15% contingency on top of the awardee's price for a total budgeted price of $344,920 to cover any unforeseen or additional services.
Okay, thank you so much, Dejana. If we go to the next slide. This is our development timeline. This will pick us up as to where we are right now in the process. We're in the last box. I direct your attention to the last box. In last month, March of 2023, a extension on the triangle piece, which is a portion owned by the county and DOT. That additional extension fee was paid, and that extends it out into September. We are now at the April special session of the commission, where we have the 3 asks in front of you today. And if that moves forward, the next projected steps would be the projected closing in early third quarter of this year. And that would be the start of construction and mobilization. And then we are projecting the construction be completed and agency move in sometime in 2025. Be the second quarter of 2025. Next slide, please. The next steps from now until closing are outlined on this slide. This is still development timeline, but it's a more granular look at the pre-construction schedule. Essentially, the benefits of the early start are outlined in this. It expedites the process of selecting and approving materials and equipment, like we mentioned before, and it also does provide a short-term bridge between the notice to proceed on the early start and the contract closing. And this, again, all the activities that are involved, it just breaks it down and shows the closing at some point in September. And the next slide, please. I wanted to highlight the sustainability features at the building. This is going to be a new office building, and it will comply with the as high a level of standard that we can apply, which we've achieved a LEED version 4 building design and construction gold level. That is LEED is really a roadmap for documenting the credit requirements, but it also offers best practices advice. And so the design team has taken that into account, and the notable features in the HQ are outlined on this slide. There's some really high level measures that we're pushing for ourselves as well as for the building. And it will save money in the long run. There's some exciting features in both electrical and use that way, but also in terms of water use and indoor air quality, which has been determined to be very helpful in employee productivity. And so those are features that have been baked into the design from the very beginning several years ago, and so they are at the forefront of what we want to achieve with this new construction.
Jay,
Yeah.
have we incorporated the new requirement of a lactation room or
We have.
space?
Yeah, yes, we have. That was part of the new design to include a what's it called? It's a lactation.
Lactation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. These are the past commission actions that have been in front of you on related to the HQ project. And the last slide, if you go one more slide, is the summary of recommendations that we're asking for today. Those are, you know, I'll summarize these. Authorize and the executive director to execute an early start agreement with Paradigm Contractors for amount not to exceed $837,000. As we said, that was $766,968 plus $70,000 in contingency. It provides a limited notice to proceed for the early start work. There's an approval to reallocate the savings in the HQ pre-development budget to fund the early start in the amount not to exceed $837,000. There's a request to authorize the selection of ECS to provide construction material testing, third-party inspection services, and authorize our executive director to negotiate and execute a contract with ECS in an amount up to $299,930 and accept a total budget for materials testing and third-party inspection of $344,920, which includes a commission-held contingency of $44,990, which was 15% of the contract. I'll stop there, and thank you. And if you have any questions, we're happy to answer those at this time.
Are there any questions from commissioners, staff?
I'd like to move approval if there are no questions of resolution 2328.
Commissioner Simon and commissioners. So one of the items that we also wanted to make sure was included in the request, and I didn't mention it, is the fact that we're asking for the approval to select and negotiate with Paradigm, the general contractor, so that the executive director can negotiate a guaranteed maximum price contract. That was an additional request.
My only quick question on that was, I think we had talked about, you know, that presentation earlier had a budget. And did we expect that to come down a little bit?
The budget overall, the overall budget, we expect to be probably the same.
Okay.
But we will work to reduce that as best as we can.
Okay.
And commissioners,
Your overall budget come down $1 million because of the $837,000 that we're now not having to spend.
Well, the overall, I was including the pre-development as well as development. Yeah, the overall, those are costs that are part of that particular line item, which would be the general contractor cost. Yes, that offsets by the early start. Yes, but
to be clear, the overall budget for this project will go down based on what we just advised in terms of the great work that the team has done to identify savings. And our hope is that as we negotiate with our general contractor, we get a sense of what current costs are today as we're negotiating, that we'll also see some cost savings. And we'll continue to report out as we do have cost savings. And we are working extremely hard to ensure that we do not have any cost overruns, which is why we're trying to get started as early as possible. And so you have that full commitment from us.
And I do commend the team for, you know,
Yes.
that being very efficient with timing, not just thinking linearly and, you know, looking for those efficiencies. So,
It's been moved.
I would second,
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve resolution 23-28. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers, nay. So ordered. That concludes the business of the special session. So without any other information to come before us, the meeting is now declared adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you,
Staff,
Commissioner.
I also